announcements that should be aware of? Anybody have something? Okay. Like I said, Dan started his first and second Samuel class last week. I don't know that he trusts me to continue with that, so we're going to do something a little different, but it does tie in with Samuel, and that's the book of Ruth, right before 1st and 2nd Samuel in your Bibles. And I'm sure I could probably call on anybody here, and you all could give me a short 2 or 3 sentence description of the story of Ruth. But I like it because it has a lot of insights into other aspects, of like the Levitical law, the customs of the time period, that era and that location in the world. It ties into other pieces of Scripture, and that's what I hope to bring out today. We're going to go through the story. Hopefully, you have time, but I'm going to try to bring some highlights up that interest me, and hopefully will you too. So, just digging right into it. Ruth 1, it says, "In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there." So, back up. Just from the beginning, it says there was in the time of the judges, so we don't have an exact date. Probably 1100 BC, which lines up fairly close to the beginning of Samuel. So it should be pretty much a contemporary account. But this Ephrathites from Bethlehem, I thought they were Israelites. Well, here's a quote out of Genesis. As I was returning from Padan, this is Jacob, kind of relating his story. "As I was returning from Padan, to my sorrow, Rachel died in the land of Canaan while we were still on the way, a little distance from Ephrath. So I buried her there beside the road to Ephrath, that is, Bethlehem." So Ephrath is either an ancient Canaanite name for what we now call Bethlehem, or what was called that in the Bible times, or it's just the entire area around Bethlehem. But Ephrathites are people that happen to live around Bethlehem. Because they were in that area, that's the tribe of Judah's allotment, so obviously that Elimelech was from the tribe of Judah. Now, the other interesting thing about Bethlehem, we know, okay, that's where Christ was born, sure, and we throw that out there, but the actual name, if we break it down into the Hebrew, the first part, Beth, is actually the Hebrew word bet, which is the Hebrew letter for B, but it also means house. It's the word for house. So Bet-Lehem is house of bread, or more generically, house of food. So they're having to leave the house of food because there's no food in the house. There's a famine going on. So it's some kind of an ironic name there for this time period. Now, famines in the Bible is nothing we haven't seen before. Genesis 12, Abraham left the land of Canaan to go to Egypt because of a famine. 26, Isaac had to leave to go to the Philistine area because of a famine. Genesis 41 is the beginning of the account of Joseph and him interpreting Pharaoh's dreams, where there's going to be this 7 years of famine. So it's definitely something that we see occurring cyclically throughout Scripture. Now, another quote about Bethlehem, we know, from Micah, and this was quoted in the New Testament when the Magi come from probably Persia, come to meet Herod and say, "Where's the new king?" And they get the scribes together and they quote from Micah, "But you, Bethlehem, Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times." So once again, those 2 names go together, Bethlehem and Ephrathah. Now, they went to Moab. I hope that shows up okay. You can see where I've got Bethlehem circled there, kind of in the middle to the left. They would have gone around the Red Sea to the country of Moab. Ammon's the one tied to the north, Moab to the south. In a class we did a couple of months ago on Bible history, we talked about this. But if you remember from the account of Lot, after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot and his two daughters left Zoar, and they settled in the mountains, for he was afraid to stay in Zoar. He and his two daughters lived in a cave, and we get this rather unsettling story. It ends up, so both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their father. The older daughter had a son, and she named him Moab. He is the father of the Moabites today. So people that, would not have been particularly well liked by the Israelites, because Moab didn't let them travel through the land when they came up out of Egypt, for one thing, but also because of this rather sordid story of how they came to be. But they go to Moab because they need to get food. Now, continued on with the story, verse 3, now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her two sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her two sons and her husband. Now, just looking at culture at this time period, they married Moabite women. So they would probably had to have lived there. It goes on to say that they stayed there 10 years in total. I'm speculating here a little bit, but my guess is they went there. Their sons were probably younger. It took a while to establish themselves and to arrange a marriage, because that's how things worked back then. You didn't just go out and find somebody and marry, and you were arranged. So for their parents, Elimelech and Naomi, to find daughters or women for their sons to marry would have probably taken a while. And when they married them, Orpah and Ruth were probably somewhere between 12 and 14 years old. That was the typical marriage age for young girls in that time frame in that part of the world. So very young girls. Again, I'm speculating that marriage probably took place toward the end of the 10 years they were there. And so they're still very young. Let's say Ruth, I'm going to guess, is probably no more than 15 years old when this story takes place now, to give you an idea of how things are different in their cultures. So we know the account. Elimelech's dead. The two sons are dead. Naomi hears that there's food back in Bethlehem, so she's going to go back to her home. And the two daughters-in-law go with her for a little bit, and then she says, hey, look, just go back home. There's no reason for you to come with me. I don't have any more sons for you to marry. Just go back with your family, find somebody here. And, of course, Orpah eventually does go back, but Ruth refuses. She's going to cling to Naomi. Her statement, but Ruth, when she tried to get her to go back into verse 16, but Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord, and she's calling God by his name here, Yahweh, may Yahweh deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me. So she is determined to stick with her mother-in-law. And again, she is probably a very young girl, and that's the only person she has now. So she's not going to let go of Naomi. So it's a very similar statement to, if you go, which Dan will cover here sometime in the weeks ahead, when you get to 2 Samuel chapter 15, this is during Absalom's rebellion. David's collected a few members of his household, and they're trying to get out of Jerusalem so they don't get killed. And this man named Ittai the Gittite is with him. And David says, go back. Don't hang around with me. I'm an outcast here. And again, 2 Samuel 15, verses 19 through 21, he says, no, I'm going with you. I'm sticking with you. You're the guy that I'm going to follow. Very similar statement of faithfulness to this person. So Ruth and Naomi head back to Bethlehem. They end up there, and I'm going to jump down to verse 18. And I'm going to read this. It's one thing I wish our Bibles actually translated the Hebrew names and just put the translation in our Bibles instead of the names, because you hear the name and you don't know what that means, but they always have meanings, and you have to sometimes look in the footnotes of your Bible and you can find it. But I'm going to read it with the translation, because Naomi means pleasant. And she gets back to Bethlehem. So the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. This is verse 19. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women exclaimed, "Can this be," says Naomi, "can this be pleasant?" And she said, "Don't call me pleasant," she told them. "Call me bitter," which is the word Mara in your Bibles, but call me bitter, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me pleasant? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. So Pleasant returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. But again, she's saying, nothing in my life is any good. Everything's been taken away. Call me bitter, because my life is bitter now. That's the end of the first chapter, and we're going to see things start to change. So, mentions they were here at the beginning of the barley harvest. Now, they had two main crops, barley and wheat. Barley came in first, generally around the time of Passover. And then several weeks later, about the time of Pentecost, is when the wheat harvest came in. Barley was the less desirable grain. They would use it a lot for animal feed, or if you were poor, that was the type of grain you would eat as well, because it was cheaper. And if you go look in detail, feeding the 5,000, they actually, at least certain translations, I think they get more detailed, say it's barley loaves they were feeding them. So it was the poor people's bread they were feeding them. But so it's time to do grain. Oh, well, I forgot this slide. Just to give you an idea, this is looking into the land of Moab across the Dead Sea from the Judean wilderness. That's the mountains of Moab you're looking at there. And that's where they headed for their 10-year sojourn. But harvesting wheat and barley, obviously they didn't have one of these. John Deere wasn't around yet, or the Massey Ferguson, whatever that is. But this is what we know about harvesting, right? You've got combine harvester going through, plucking all the heads off, taking the grain outside of the shell, getting rid of the straw, and it ends up going into this nice truck full of all the grain, just pouring right in there. One fell swoop, it's done. Obviously, that's not how they had it. There was quite a bit more to it for them to harvest their wheat and their barley. So, and that's where getting into the culture here and what was really going on. So, starting in chapter 2, it mentions, now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side from the clan of Elimelech, a man of standing, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, "Let me go to the fields and pick the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor." Now, two widows here, right? They don't have any way to support themselves, so they need something. So she needs to get some food. Naomi said to her, "Go ahead, my daughter." So she went out and began to glean in the fields behind the harvesters. As it turned out, she found herself working in the field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. Just then Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "The Lord be with you." "The Lord bless you," they called back. Boaz asked the foreman of his harvesters, "Whose young woman is that?" The foreman replied, "She is the Moabitess who came back from Moab with Naomi." She said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters." She went into the field and has worked steadily from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter. So Boaz takes an interest in her because he knows the story of how she's clung to his relative, Naomi. Boaz said to Ruth, "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with my servant girls, watch the field where the men are harvesting, and follow along after the girls. I have told the men not to touch you, and whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled." So I'm kind of assuming here, based on what he's saying, that these poor widows or somebody that would go and try to glean in the fields were vulnerable. Now, whether that was just because people didn't want them picking up free grain or something more sinister with a young, vulnerable woman, maybe that was typical. But Boaz saying, "Stay here. I'm going to make sure nobody bothers you, and you're going to be okay." Now, the typical harvesting methods, you had the men would go out with sickles, and they would cut the grain stalks throughout the field. And then, so generally, the women would follow, gathering the stalks into bundles, and then they would carry them, where we're going to see later, to where they do the further processing with it. So, two-step process. And remember, he said, follow along from my servant girls. They would have been the ones gathering these grain sheaves up and taking them to get the grain. So, from the Mosaic Law, Leviticus 23:22, when you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Leave them for the poor and the alien. I am the Lord your God. So there was instructions from God that you were supposed to leave some of your harvest in the field for those who were not as fortunate, that they could come behind and gather food. And that's what Ruth is doing here. So the men are going through, cutting it, getting, 90-something% of whatever they're getting. The women come and gather that, and then whatever's left over, you're allowed to go glean. So here's a picture. Obviously, just a couple of kids are going through a field that's been harvested. They're picking up probably individual kernels of the grain, whatever they can find, to make sure they got it all. So that's gleaning, and that was Ruth's job in this case. Now, jumping down to verse 17 in chapter 2. So catch this here. So Ruth gleaned in the field until evening. So she would have probably started first thing in the morning. Let's say she's been working 12 hours here, gleaning. Her work is not done, however. She gleaned till evening. Then she threshed the barley she had gathered, and it amounted to about an ephah. So just because once you've got it picked up, your work's not done. So she would have probably taken something like this basket on the right there and put the heads of the wheat in it, and then stirred it around and mashed it, trying to break the shells off of the wheat kernels so you can actually get to the good part of the grain. It's possible that you could just throw it on the ground and beat it with a stick if you've got a small amount. One tie in here, if you remember in Judges, when Gideon he said he was trying to make sure the Midianites didn't see them gathering in their crops. He was threshing his wheat in a wine press, which is just a small area. He wasn't going to do it out in the open, so same type of situation here. She's taking it and she's going through and cracking this shell off and getting that grain out of it. And it says it amounted to about an ephah. That is roughly, actually it's a little more than 5 gallons, but to give you an idea, think of a big office water cooler bottle. 5 gallons, probably even closer to 6 gallons of wheat kernels. Now, I don't know how much wheat you have to gather and crush and mash to fill up a bottle that big, but I suspect it's quite a bit. So there's a lot of work there. So she spent all day in the field, and then after that was done, she had to go through and do all the work to actually get the grain. So clearly a hard worker, someone's willing to put the effort in. Let's go on to the next part of the story here. So she's gleaned, and she gets back and brings what she's earned essentially to Naomi, and she carried it back to the town. And her mother-in-law saw how much she had gathered. Ruth also brought out and gave her what she had left over from what she had eaten, because Boaz had actually given her some food to eat as well, and she saved some of that for Naomi. Her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." Then Ruth told her mother-in-law about the one at whose place she had been working. "The name of the man I work for today is Boaz." "The Lord bless him," Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. "He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead." She added, "That man is our close relative. He is one of our kinsmen redeemers." Then Ruth the Moabitess said, "He even said to me, 'Stay with my workers until they finish harvesting all my grain.'" Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It will be good for you, my daughter, to go with his girls, because in someone else's field you might be harmed." So Ruth stayed close to the servant girls of Boaz to glean until the barley and wheat harvests were finished, and she lived with her mother-in-law. So redeemer, kinsman redeemer. So this word goel in Hebrew, the nearest of kin, had as one of his rights to purchase back any land that had been forfeited by an Israelite because they had sold it, or in this case, we don't know if Elimelech sold his land before he went to Moab, or just was so poor that he had to just didn't know anymore what happened. But Boaz, as the kinsman redeemer, had a right to take that land and to farm it, and even to give it back to him, to redeem it to the family. So that's where we are. She's met this man Boaz. She's working in his field. And once again, we have this note now from Naomi about you might be harmed if you go somewhere else. So once again, there's apparently an issue with these gleaners who were trying to just gather enough to get barely enough to eat. They could be victims of crimes and people hurting them at this time period. Remember, we're in the time of the Judges, which said everybody did, if you remember the last line of the book of Judges, everybody did what was right in his own eyes. Apparently that was definitely going on here. So you get to chapter 3, and one day Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not try to find a home for you where you will be well provided for? Is not Boaz, with whose servant girls you have been a kinsman of ours? Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash and perfume yourself and put on your best clothes, then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying, then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do." You're thinking, well, that's kind of a weird thing they're trying to do here. What's going on? Well, let's talk about this whole thing with threshing, first of all, because as a non-country boy, non-farmer, that wouldn't mean anything to me. But this idea of kinsman redeemer and then what he was doing. So out of Numbers 27, if a man dies and leaves no son, turn his inheritance over to his daughter. If he has no daughter, give his inheritance to his brothers. If he has no brothers, give his inheritance to his father's brothers. Father has no brothers, give his inheritance to the nearest relative in his clan, that he may possess it. So that's one thing we're talking about here, their land being taken back by a relative. And then also, we've heard this term, probably heard this term before, Levirate marriage. If brothers are living together and one of them dies without a son, his widow must not marry outside the family. Her husband's brother shall take her and marry her and fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to her. The first son she bears shall carry on the name of the dead brother, so that his name will not be blotted out from Israel. So they would have a son in the name of the dead man, so his family line would continue. So that's part of what we're talking about here too. He's the kinsman redeemer, and then they're talking about threshing. So threshing is the separation of the grain and the seeds from the husks and the straw of the wheat or the barley. In this step is the chaff removal process that comes before winnowing. So in our modern world, that's what's all going on inside the combine, but they didn't have that. So a threshing floor is something like this, as an example. It's a fairly large, flat area with very hard surface, either prepared for that by itself or naturally maybe something that's got a lot of rock exposed that's fairly flat that they can lay the wheat out on. But this is a threshing floor. They would take, those girls that gathered up the bundles would take them to the threshing floor where they would thresh it. And that was done generally with oxen. Could be other farm animals. The oxen could be pulling a cart or a sled to help. But they walk around the threshing floor stomping on the grain and the wheat. And it breaks that shell away from the wheat kernel or the barley kernel. And they just keep doing that over and over until they break it all apart. So that is threshing out the grain. Notice in this picture there's piles of what I assume is more wheat they're going to bring onto the threshing floor there as they keep processing it with the oxen walking around on it. Always makes me wonder what gets mixed in with the wheat, what the oxen are walking around on it, but that's another issue. We won't deal with that. But so that's threshing. So just thinking of threshing floors and how they apply later on in the Bible as well. Also in 2 Samuel, if you remember the count where David takes a census, an unauthorized census by God, and the Lord is mad at him. And so 2 Samuel chapter 24, the Lord sent a plague on Israel from the morning until the end of the time designated. 70,000 people from Dan to Beersheba died. Angel stretched out his hand to destroy Jerusalem. The Lord relented concerning the disaster and said to the angel who was afflicting the people, "Enough, withdraw your hand." The angel of the Lord was then at the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. On that day, Gad went to David and said to him, this is a few verses later, "Go up and build an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite." So this is a pretty important threshing floor. Now, if you can tell what I'm looking at, this is part of Jerusalem. The circled part is a small area that sits on a ridge that was the city of Jebus, which David took, became the city of David. It's this little ridge that sits above the Kidron Valley. And presumably at the top of that ridge was a big flat area that Araunah had his threshing floor on. Now, we can't see that anymore today because Herod, built a huge temple, or a huge complex on it, and Solomon built the temple there first, obviously, but so somewhere underneath all that landfill, and what we now call the Temple Mount, is the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. The point that David had to build the altar there, and then later on Solomon built the temple, and then now we have, again, the Temple Mount that Herod built. Of course, the temple's gone, but so threshing floor plays a pretty tremendous role in the history of Israel, because this one from Araunah was where the temple sat. Now that I've gone off on that bunny trail, I'll get back to the story here. And the other thing, maybe one more bunny trail. Oxen are treading out the grain, or the wheat on the threshing floor. You remember this. This is from Paul, but he's quoting Deuteronomy. "Who serves as a soldier at his own expense, who plants a vineyard and does not eat its grapes, who tends a flock and does not drink the milk. Do I say this merely on human authority? Doesn't the law say the same thing? For it is written in the law of Moses," from Deuteronomy, "do not muzzle an ox while it is treading out the grain." That's what they're talking about. They're wandering around on the threshing floor, and if they happen to take a bite of it, it's okay. Is it about oxen God is concerned? Surely he says this for us, doesn't he? So Paul was making the point that people whose job is to spread the gospel can be paid. Of course, then he goes on to say he doesn't take anything because he wants to make sure nobody can say anything about him. But the oxen treading out the grain, if you didn't ever know what that meant, that other picture there, that's what they were talking about. So once you tread out the grain, now you've got wheat and chaff and the good part all mixed together on this threshing floor. You got to separate it. So that's called winnowing. And if you're recalling the story here, Naomi tells Ruth he's going to be winnowing the barley. So winnowing is the method where you separate it. And basically, it's pretty simple. You're taking something like a big pitchfork, a winnowing fork, throwing it all up in the air while it's windy, and of course the chaff and the straw and everything gets blown away, and the wheat falls back to the ground. And I guess if you do that about 10,000 times, you end up with a pile of wheat, and you get what you want. So that's how they separated their wheat and their chaff. But this also has a really neat application to the New Testament from John the Baptist. From Matthew, he says, this is John the Baptist speaking, "I baptize you with water for repentance, but after me will come one who is more powerful than I, whose sandals I am not fit to carry. He will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and with fire. His winnowing fork is in his hand, and he will clear his threshing floor, gathering his wheat into the barn and burning up the chaff with unquenchable fire." So you don't want to be the chaff, because it's going to be blown away and gathered and burned up. So now you know what John the Baptist was talking about too. So I'm going to jump over to verse 7. Boaz has finished threshing and winnowing. It says, "When Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile." I assume he's laying down there because he wants to make sure he protects his grain that he's spent all this time getting, and nobody comes and steals it. Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man, and he turned and discovered a woman lying at his feet. That would be a little startling. Who are you? He asked. I am your servant Ruth, she said. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer. The Lord bless you, my daughter, he replied. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All my fellow townsmen know that you are a woman of noble character. And although it is true that I am a near of kin, there is a kinsman redeemer nearer than I. Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to redeem, good, then let him redeem. But if he does not, or he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until morning. So what in the world is going on here? So, spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer. That was an idiom that basically meant, I guess it's kind of like a Sadie Hawkins dance when the girls ask the boys. This is the woman saying, marry me. You're the kinsman redeemer from my family. Please marry me. So it was, and this idea of covering the woman with the garment is the idea that he's going to protect her and take care of her as they get married. Now, the Lord uses this same analogy in Ezekiel 16:8. And Ezekiel here, God is talking, obviously Ezekiel's recording it. God is explaining his entire relationship going all the way back to Abraham and following through. And he says, later I passed by, and when I looked at you and saw that you were old enough for love, I spread the corner of my garment over you and covered your nakedness. I gave you my solemn oath and entered into a covenant with you, declares the sovereign Lord, and you became mine. Now, I warn you, if you read that passage, go on, this is where God is not happy with the Israelites. Obviously, they're already in captivity because of all the idolatry they did. And it goes into very graphic detail about how he thinks about their idolatry as like a wayward spouse. But anyway, the same phrase here, covering you with the corner of my garment. That is a covenant relationship, a marriage relationship that's saying we're going to be together forever, and I'm going to take care of you. So we're going to jump now to chapter 4, and let me just read it first here. So meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat there. When the kinsman redeemer he had mentioned came along, Boaz said, "Come over here, my friend, and sit down." So we went over and sat down. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, "Sit here," and they did so. Then he said to the kinsman redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our brother Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here," that's the elders, "and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me, so I will know, for no one has the right to do it except you, and I am next in line." Now we got a farmer, chance to get some more land. What's his answer? "I will redeem it. Absolutely, I'm going to get some more land." Then Boaz said, "On the day you buy the land from Naomi and from Ruth the Moabitess, you acquire the dead man's widow in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property." Whoa, I didn't plan to marry somebody here. I just wanted some land. So he backs off. At this, the kinsman redeemer said, "Then I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it." Now, in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. Now, follow up on that a little bit. So first of all, now this is not Bethlehem. This is Beersheba. But the idea of going to the town gate and sitting with the elders, I think, can be somewhat illustrated here. So there's streets and houses in Beersheba, but if you kind of the top left there, you see where I've got an area circled that was the gate. So you would walk in, and there were two stone pillars that the door post of the gate would attach to that you would close, obviously, at night. So that's the gate. And then right past that is the kind of the main city square where people would meet. So he said he went to the gate to wait for everybody. And the area I want to really concentrate on is where I've got that yellow circle there, kind of in between those two walls, if you can see it. So that's what you see close. It's actually a bench that everybody would sit on. So the elders of the people would gather there, and they would, judge disputes between individuals and other things, or deal with business transactions like this. So presumably the elders would have lined up in a very similar setting here, sat down and listened to what Boaz had to say and what the other man had to say, and as they were working on this business transaction. Now, again, the other man decides, I don't want to marry anybody. I don't want any part of this. So more on this thing about sandals. In Deuteronomy 24, this was kind of a humorous one, but Deuteronomy 24, it's talking about this Levirate marriage and carrying on a dead man's name. However, if a man does not want to marry his brother's wife, she shall go to the elders at the town gate and say, my husband's brother refuses to carry on his brother's name in Israel. He will not fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to me. Then the elders of the town shall summon him and talk to him. If he persists in saying, I do not want to marry her, his brother's widow shall go up to him in the presence of the elders, take off one of his sandals, spit in his face, and say, this is what is done to the man who will not build up his brother's family line. That man's line shall be known in Israel as the family of the unsandaled. Now, of course, Boaz is not the brother of Ruth's husband, but it's the idea of this that carried on through that nearest of kin is what we're seeing here. And nobody was spitting in anybody's face in this instance, but the idea of taking off the sandal is, again, like I said, this idea of completing the transaction. So a couple of notes from some commentaries. He took off the sandal and gave it to him to whom he made the surrender, intimating thereby that whatever right he had to tread or go upon the land, he conveyed and transferred it upon a valuable consideration to the purchaser. And Wycliffe Bible Commentary mentions they see similar practices from the Nuzu tablets, which I believe is Assyrian or Babylon. So anyway, this idea of taking off a sandal was a tradition in the ancient times. Got a little farther, didn't I? Okay. Anyway, so Boaz gets to redeem the land. That means he also takes on Ruth as his wife in order to carry on that family line's name. So just jumping to verse 13, they're married. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. Then he went to her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The women said to Naomi, praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth. Then Naomi took the child, so the woman who lost everything now is holding a grandson. Took the child, laid him in her lap, and cared for him. The women living there said, Naomi has a son, and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. So, the line here directly to David, which is obviously tying into 1 Samuel, Dan will be studying with you here coming up. And then ultimately know that David's descendant was in fact the Christ. So if you go to the genealogy in Matthew, when he starts at Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Judah, Perez, Hezron, Ram, Amminadab, Nahshon, Salmon, Boaz, the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth, one of the very few women who was actually mentioned in the genealogy. Whose mother was Ruth, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David. So it's a pretty neat story, showing how God works. It has implications for those outside of the Israelites, because here we have a Moabitess who is a direct ancestor of the chosen one, the anointed, the Christ, the Messiah. So God obviously doesn't show favoritism, as we've seen. It's a story of how God takes care of people, even when things seem really bad. Things turn out well. So it's a neat story, and like I said, it ties in so many ways with Christ and the threshing floor and where the temple was and all these things. But anyway, that's all I got to say on it. Any questions, comments, thoughts? The town, yes, and the Dead Sea picture, yeah. You have to get up at like 4:30 in the morning to get that one, but anyway, that's it. Anything else? I guess I'll give you an extra 2 or 3 minutes back before worship, but appreciate your attention, and we'll see you here in a few minutes.